Hi, Kaylee. Thanks for being here.
Yes, I'm so excited.
Same. Okay, so tell me, of course, I know your family, but tell me a little bit about your family and kind of who you grew up with and a little bit about them.
Okay, so I grew up with my mom and my two brothers. My mom was a single mom for most of my childhood. Um, my mom is white and my dad is black. My stepdad, who was in my household for a short period of time, um, is also black. So my brothers and my two brothers and myself are all biracial.
And what was your relationship with your dad growing up?
Growing up, pretty much until high school, I saw him kind of like every other holiday.
Okay.
We didn't really have a set, like I had no set custody schedule or anything. And then I would go for about a week in the summer, every summer up until high school. And the only reason I really stopped was because was involved in like sports and stuff, and I just couldn't be away. Yeah, I just got busy.
Okay. Where did you grow up?
Fort Dodge, Iowa.
Okay, Fort Dodge, Iowa.
Little
So,
town in the Midwest. Very typical Midwestern, in the middle of nowhere kind of town.
yeah, tell me about diversity in your town.
Um, well, my hometown was probably is probably considered one of the most diverse towns in Iowa. Um, Large population of Black people. I graduated with like 4 or 5 mixed kids. So there were definitely
Large population.
large, huge population.
Huge population.
Large. I thought I grew up with a lot of Black people until I moved to the South. Yeah, but I mean, there were definitely people that looked like me at school. I was friends with both Black kids and white kids. It didn't feel sort of like segregated or anything in elementary, middle, or high school at all for me.
What's your earliest memory of race regarding race? Do you have one?
Yeah, like the very first time I remember, I don't know, I guess maybe I wouldn't, then I didn't realize that it was a race thing, but I definitely realized I was different in like elementary school because my hair was very different than the other girls at that school. I got relaxers when I was little, which is like a chemical process that straightens your hair. But my ponytails were always way thicker than the other girls. And I didn't, not necessarily got made fun of for it, but it was definitely pointed out that.
Why did you get it straightened back then? Do you remember?
Um, I I would assume that I got it straightened because my mom didn't know how to handle curly hair. I know that she tried, like, we've had conversations now as an adult where my dad's cousins sort of, walked her through like different products to buy. I always had the right shampoo and conditioner and like moisturizers for my hair. Just when I was really little, it was hard for her to like fix it or put it up or do whatever. So I think, um, yeah, I think it was probably just a decision of like easier maintenance in her mind at that time to have me get relaxers.
Did that have any impact on you growing up with like your identity and feeling like you needed to have the straight hair or?
Um, I don't think, no, I don't think that at that time, I didn't think about it at all.
Yeah.
I think it was very abnormal that once a month or every 6 weeks, I had to spend an entire day at the salon. And the woman who used to do my hair, Ethel, was my stepdad's cousin. And she moved out of town. It was probably like 5th grade through 8th grade. She moved away. And so my mom and I were like doing them at home
Oh,
for
wow.
a big chunk of time. And then as soon as Ethel moved back, my mom was like, thank God. And so I went back to her. But yeah, I mean, she was the only person in town that my mom also trusted to do it. Because I think she was very aware that like things could go wrong or you could get chemical burns and stuff like that. So she definitely knew what was up, but I just don't think, like, I would never let my kid get a relaxer now, you know? And I think she would feel the same way now. It just back then, she didn't know any better.
So when people ask you now, how do you identify when it comes to race?
I say biracial or black and white.
Okay. Did you ever struggle with that racial identity?
Yeah. I mean, when I was really young, it was silly stuff like, you know, the boys didn't have crushes on me or whatever. And I sort of thought that if I was white, maybe that would have been different. But then, I mean, my family, close family and my extended family, I definitely think all played a huge part in me feeling comfortable in my own skin. I've always been very accepted and never excluded from anything because of it. So
Did you feel that from both sides of your family?
Yeah. I'm not that close with my dad's side of the family. He just really wasn't around. His like immediate family is very small, but my extended family on my dad's side is really big. My grandma is one of 13 kids, and all of them are still living. So my dad I don't even know how many like cousins my dad has, let alone like in my generation. But I mean, anytime I was around them, I felt very comfortable. If anything, I've gotten more like, the only time I've ever noticed colorism, like on my dad's side of the family, is when people talk about my eyes, and then I think it's just like a jealousy.
Eyes.
Yeah, I'm like, okay, like I have green eyes, but I mean, I just, even when I try to think about, you know, oh, maybe something, it's just like, I did not know that I was any different growing up. I feel almost as though it was like I was sheltered in a way.
Sounds like in a good way.
Yeah, in a good way. I was very protected.
Did you feel the same way? Because I know like our grandma's generations tend to be more like conservative and stuff. How was that?
I didn't notice, well, even like as our grandmas are sisters, they still have very different beliefs.
Oh yeah, I got the liberal grandma.
Yeah, I just like don't understand how. My mom and I were literally just talking about this. It's so frustrating because, like, our grandmas are college educated women. They should know better, and so it's very frustrating now that later in life, my grandma has chosen this sort of outspoken conservative lifestyle. I mean, that's what she's living now.
Then do you have conversations with your grandma? Can you?
So I didn't even realize how conservative my grandma was until I was in college and I was dating a trans person at the time. And my grandma left like she had come to the town I was in, to Ames, where I was going to college, and we had gone out to eat. And then when I got out of the car, she was dropping me off at my dorm, and she handed me this stack of papers. And she was like, I just want you to read these. And I had no idea what it was. Like, she's also, I mean, they're old, so she prints things off on the computer for me to read all the time. I didn't really think anything of it until I got into my dorm room, and it was like, this is why you're going to hell. This is what's happening. Like, you know, basically these pamphlets of saying how this is like not what God wants for me. So the only times that I've ever really like felt things directly from her have been involving my sexuality and not necessarily my race. But I guess to answer your question, like, no, I just avoid the topics with her.
Yeah.
She's someone that, and it's not necessarily this like, you know, I'm not saying she's part of that generation, that it's just better to not go there. It is just a personal feeling that I have, that it is not worth straining my relationship with her at this point to have those hard conversations. Yeah. I always felt like 100% sure that everyone was going to just welcome me with open arms, which is so, I mean, obviously now you know, you hear these like such devastating stories about like from people whose families, you know, cast them out on the street. And I just, that thought never even crossed my mind.
It's wonderful. Yeah.
I
We're
feel
really
very,
lucky in that
very,
way.
very lucky that, and just that I've always had open communication with all of the like adults in my family, right? The people older than me. I've always felt comfortable going to anyone in my family and talking to them about anything, which feels very safe and comforting, you know, whether that be, you know, sexual assault or whatever that could be. I've always felt very comfortable like asking for help too.
So was there anything that was challenging in forming your identity, whether it's your sexual orientation or your racial identity?
I think probably starting around like when I mentioned like starting around when Obama became president, I just felt like I constantly had to prove something. And that maybe was like the most difficult thing about my identity, like proving to people that racism is still real, or proving to people that homophobia is a thing. That feels to me more challenging than any like safety situation or love and affection from others.
Do you feel like it was people who maybe you went to college with or grew up with who didn't think that racism existed?
Yeah, sure. So, I mean, we live in the area of social media or whatever. So when I would say like 2008, sort of 2010 maybe timeline, you know, I was still like, now I only have Instagram, but I was still on Facebook back then. And I just felt like it was a constant battle of you post something that happens to you and people either fully negate it and tell you like, no, that didn't happen, even though you experienced the situation, or you know, this whole like resharing society and people just commenting at you like, that's not real, what you're saying is a lie, even though you're living it every day.
It's your experience.
Yes. And I really do try to only speak about my lived experience. You know, when you experience those situations, is it either like I feel like the need to sort of double down on my activism and like self-advocation, is that a word? Self-advocating for my
advocate, yeah.
Like, or double down on having to self-advocate, or are you supposed to like, what do you, when you are a person of color, you cannot hide. It's not like you can just be quiet and be like, okay, fine, I'm not going to notice all of these things that are happening because they're happening to me.
Yeah.
Obviously, I separate things that have happened to me into like overt racism and microaggression. So those are the two categories that I feel like I experience. And every time that I've been in one of those like serious situations, like the ones that I've talked about on Instagram before, I knew it was just overt racism.
Like that one, people minimizing your experience.
Yeah, for sure. That particular one in college, I mean, it was just, I was like, I had a bunch of 13-year-old white kids with me. It wasn't like I was kidnapping them, or I knew I had, you know, and it was,
yeah, so, you had, can you quickly tell the story? Do you feel comfortable?
Yeah, so it was after a college football game, because we live in such a like close area with so many close family members, everyone was tailgating and hanging out. I think I had like 5 or 6 of my cousins, or, you know, close friends of cousins with me. And they were all either 8th grade or younger, and this was while I was in college. So instead of one of my older family members driving them home drunk, I said, why don't you guys hang out, sober up, I'll drive the kids home. And so we were pulled over.
You were sober.
Yeah. Oh, completely sober. I was definitely not 21, and, I mean, not saying that people under 21 don't drink, but
You were not drinking.
Yes. And so I was pulled over by 4 police cars, 2 officers in each car. So 8 people pulled us over. Obviously they ran the tags, and it was not my vehicle. It was a family member, close family friend's vehicle. Her 2 kids were in the car. And said, yes, this is my mom's car. She told, this is my cousin. She's supposed to be driving us home. My mom's drunk at the football stadium.
You're being so responsible.
Trying to be. And the police officers proceeded, they surrounded the car, guns were drawn, we were all asked to get out of the car. The police officers asked the kids for ID, and of course Afton, my cousin was like, I have my library card, but like they didn't even have learners permit.
Kid has an ID, yeah.
So she was like, they didn't have identification. And 13-year-old girls and boys look like 13-year-old girls and boys. It wasn't even like we all looked like we might have been in college,
Mm-hmm.
So they asked, they pulled my 2 cousins away whose mom owned the car. They had to call their mom.
What a scary experience. For you as a college kid, but also these little kids.
For them, yeah. And then they pulled the other 3 away from me. So I was separated from all of them as like their adult supervisor guardian, until they finally got it cleared up. I think they told me that I was like swerving all over the road, was their reason for pulling me over. But, even when my brothers weren't with me at the time, so I was the only person of color in the car. I think at one point we were asked like how we were related, and I wasn't asked, the kids were asked, like, you need to tell me how you're related to her in order for the story to be believable, instead of me as the adult giving that information. Yeah. Which I think is inappropriate anyway. You should be asking kids questions, but that's a whole different story.
Yeah, as the adult, and even if you're not related to these kids, like,
right,
what is that? You can't be a person of color and be with white kids. It's just,
yeah,
that's pretty crazy.
And I had on like a little torn up, Iowa State t-shirt. It wasn't like I looked threatening or inappropriate, or I don't know. I really don't even know what their thought could have been. I had short hair at that point, so I don't know if they initially thought they were pulling over like a male, which also is very possible.
Very possible. Not okay.
Not okay, but yes.
Okay. So how has your identity sort of changed or evolved over time?
I definitely just think that if anything, the part of my identity that has changed or like grown is my belief in like activism and abolition of the police and whatever. It is hard for me to trust white people that I don't know, and or trust people that I can't like get the full like scope of your belief system right away. So I guess maybe it's like really affected my trust in people.
When did the activism come about?
College. Definitely. I just didn't even know there were groups that you could belong to, or like I hadn't even really thought about like my mom definitely went to Planned Parenthood rallies and protests when I was a little kid. Riots, yeah. My mom also got her birth control at Planned Parenthood. So, I had been in and out of Planned Parenthood locations as a kid. I remember finding out that she was pregnant with my youngest brother in the waiting room of Planned Parenthood.
Oh, cool.
Yeah. So, I mean, there were like a couple of times there were people, you know, protesting outside that you're like killing babies or whatever. But I hadn't really thought even much about anything until I got to college and realized there are people who like really believe things one way or another. And that's when I sort of really came out of my shell and like, okay, this is where I stand on this issue. So I am going to participate in these activities.
Cool. Okay, so you moved around some.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me kind of about that?
Yeah, so I moved to Nashville in 2012. Is that right? 2011 or 2012.
Okay. Yeah.
Which was like a mind-blowing experience.
You moved from, that was when you were in Iowa State?
Yeah, so moved from Iowa to Nashville. Really, I think that was probably like I noticed race more in the South than I have anywhere
Interesting.
in the world.
Why is that?
It's, I guess I saw a lot more Black people for the first time. However, there's like a finite line of white people over here and Black people over here. It was the first time that I heard the N-word used as like a racial slur. It is the first time that I've ever had anyone use the N-word towards me. Honestly, before moving to the South, I don't even think that I would have thought that people could use that term for me. Because I don't identify as a Black person or just a Black person. So I didn't even know you could use it for a brown person.
Oh.
Yeah.
Okay. And so that had to have an impact in just like, did
Oh,
that
for
kind
sure.
of fuel the fire and like wanting
Yeah.
to be more activist, or what did that do?
Yeah, definitely. I had a really great mentor in Nashville named Candace Franklin. She was my boss at work. And, you know, when you move away from home, you kind of seek sort of like some type of maternal figure. And she was definitely that for me. She was a Black woman who was born and raised in Nashville. And I experienced racism directly, probably for the first time, I think, as far as I can remember, ever in my life at work, from a customer in the store that I worked in. So definitely having another person of color and another woman at work when those situations were sort of happening was extremely helpful to sort of process and get through them. Wow. In some sort of healthy fashion.
I mean, yeah, I can't even imagine. So it was just avert racism at your place of employment.
Yeah, at the mall. I worked at a retail store.
That's horrible.
Yeah.
And I know, so when we were talking about hair and all of that, and I remember you saying this when you were in retail too, is you experienced microaggressions when you were in the retail. What does that term mean to you? Like you mentioned, you have overt racism and you have microaggressions.
Yeah. So microaggressions, the way that I would explain them to people are sort of like the below the belt comments, right? So that can be anything. I don't like the words like minor and severe, but that can be anything from, wow, your hair is like really curly and coarse. You know, if you don't have curly and coarse hair, that is a weird thing to say to someone who is a person of color and obviously has coarse curly hair. And can be sort of like the other end of that spectrum to me is like, I'm not attracted to Black people, which is like, you're like, okay, but why? And like, yes, you can give the argument of like, we all have certain preferences, but also to have a preference means that you have like a dislike, and that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's how I would sort of define them in experiences that I've had.
Okay. That makes sense. What about, do you struggle when it comes to like compliments with your hair and things like that when it's from a white person?
Definitely. So another example of like a microaggression where people always think it's a compliment is like, your eyes are so pretty for a mixed girl, which
Like
like,
they'll add in that
yeah,
like
they'll
for
add that for a Black person or for a mixed
that's
person, which
rough.
is such a weird, like, yes, you can argue until the cows come home that green eyes are pretty on any type of person, but adding that little for whatever is weird.
Yeah, totally.
And
So for you, if it was like, wow, you have beautiful eyes and ends there, that makes more sense. That's
yeah,
just a generic
yeah,
compliment.
that is a compliment.
Okay. Yeah, that absolutely makes sense. Um, what about with, I know we've talked a little bit about this, but when it's like a white person who has children of color?
This one is really difficult for me. I mean, so I'm going to say there are sort of like levels to it, right?
Yeah.
If you are a white man with a Black woman and you have a biracial child biologically, or even if you are a white person and a Black person and you adopt a biracial child, right? That's very different. Your child looks like it comes from both of you. I would hope and think that you are like aware and open to learning if you say something inappropriate and are corrected. um I mean, I have even had to like check my own mother
Yeah.
on things that she said, and then, mom, that's racist. No, Kaylee, no, it's not. And then, you have to kind of explain to her why it's racist, right? And every time, whether she still, gets her feelings hurt, because she might get her feelings hurt because she doesn't want to be racist,
Yeah.
obviously. Um, she has an open mind to learning. So that's like one category of people to me.
Mhm.
Now, like, two white people adopting brown or Black kids is where it gets really, really sticky for me, because you almost have to do quadruple the work in order to sort of create a safe space for your children.
Yeah.
Because there's no one in that household or family who has lived that experience.
Mhm.
So it's much harder for me to forgive white people for microaggressions to others or their own children, or racism towards others or their own children, than it is for me to like forgive an interracial couple for microaggressions to others or their own children.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I know you've been approached by like white moms with biracial children and like
Yeah.
how to do, what is it? Like how to do their hair? What's those approaches?
All the things. So everything from like, these are the products I was recommended for my child's hair. What do you think of them? What do you use on your hair?
And is this just like, were you working in a place where you sold these products? Was
Just
this
like
off the
strangers
street?
off the street. Yeah. So whether that's
Way different.
so whether that was, I mean, I got the most that I've ever been really approached for things like that was this last summer after I was posting those videos on Instagram. And would just have like random people slide into my DMs asking for favors. And at first it was kind of a struggle, because obviously I want to help these people. Like, I don't want their kids to grow up feeling less than or like not as worthy, because their parents didn't know any better or have any resources.
Would they ask you for resources and how to?
Yeah. But also, like, we live in the United States. There's a brown person. You have to, it's like the 10 degrees of separation or whatever, right? Like, you have to know somebody in your own personal life who can help you with this shit. Sorry.
You're fine.
Besides a stranger on the internet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
That was my next question. So for somebody, a white person raising biracial children, a white person even just wanting to be more of an activist to get to know more, do you recommend reaching out to people in your circle? Recommend doing your own research? It's definitely not reaching out to a stranger.
It's definitely not reaching out to a stranger. One, I mean, you never know what's going on in anyone's life. Most of us don't know what's going on in the lives of those who are closest to us, really, day to day, right? I think that as someone who's like our age, I really do think that social media can be a great resource and tool for those types of things, right? So if you type in the hashtag mixed hair on Instagram, you're going to get things that show you what to use for mixed hair on Instagram. So it's really not that difficult. Google it.
Yeah.
But I mean, I definitely also can like empathize with people wanting, you know, a human to have contact with, right? Or like, unfortunately, I think a huge portion of the people that like reach out to folks, blind strangers or other, are looking for some type of validation in their life. Like, oh, good job. You're doing what is expected of you to do as a parent with biracial kids, which I'm definitely not going to give that to you.
Yeah.
But I think another portion of that really is just people who want to learn and like do better. And so you kind of have to like, unfortunately, I think for me, it's like I'm always sort of juggling and like reading the undertones of things and like trying to figure out, is this someone who's like kind of icky and just needing validation, or is this someone who, if I'm not feeling like I have the energy to sort of educate them at the moment, can I at least lead them to someone who might, or who has resources, written, audio, or other available for them?
So we talk a lot in this class as far as like social workers working with people of color. What sort of, do you have any advice for anything to like avoid, anything to make sure to do?
So I've been in therapy over half my life. I've had both.
I love that. Love pro therapy.
Yeah, very pro therapy. I've had both white and Black therapists. And for me, the like number one thing, and this is, I mean, I'm relating this to social work in a way of like, you know, people outside of your immediate circle and or like medical doctors.
Yeah, and this class is actually a therapy class too.
Okay.
So that's great.
So, I mean, and I've like had been recommended therapists before, and I've also just done like the old school Google search, like I need a new therapist, you know? And so I've always found my greatest like allies in therapy have definitely vocalized like, if they are white, you know, these are areas that I have, what do you call it, like higher education, like college, I'm college
like,
educated, like in
like certified in and that like kind of, okay.
So like all of my white therapists, even in my first session, it's like, have you taken any classes on race theory or race relations? Like those are always questions that I ask. So I think if people are forthcoming about those types of things, that is helpful, because if you ever are to run into an issue that you don't understand as a white person, hopefully you are in some sort of circle where you have colleagues who might be better suited, right? Or just, I mean, I think like right now you're doing the work in school to educate yourself about, I'm sure you're learning about the type of language to use, and, you know, yeah, I just think being like very forthcoming with what you know and what you might not know. And, you know, because I've definitely used like some jargon with white therapists where they're like, hold on, I don't know what that means. Could you explain it to me? Or last session, when you said this, I looked more into it. Like, is this what you meant? Yeah. So just like always being willing to learn too, I guess.
Just like
Or
kind of creating an environment.
yeah, and I mean, I've fully had therapists who have said, I can't, I don't feel comfortable going this route with you because I don't know enough. So yeah, just honesty.
Yeah. Do you respect that more than I guess trying to get into it
Oh,
when you
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I would rather you fully say just, I don't,
might not be the right person for you?
yeah, I might not be the right person for you. And, or like, would you be okay with me doing more research for this? Whatever that might be, or whatever you might be comfortable with. Because I've definitely also been with therapists who do not identify either as people of color or as Black people, who I feel very safe with. And I don't mind either giving them that information and or having them look it up on their own time, and then we can talk about it later.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. Is there anything else that like I didn't get to or that you are thinking of?
I
feel
don't
like
think so.
this was great. Okay, I'm gonna stop recording. Thank you.
You're welcome.